Hi, my name is Sandy Gary,
And I'm Melissa Wally.
and we are both digital learning coaches with Keep Indiana Learning. And we are so excited to talk to you about some great books that you can read with your child or with your family during the winter break and also through the dark, gloomy winter months. So, over the next few minutes, we are going to share some of our favorite winter books. We're going to also share some tips on how to keep reading engaging and exciting when you're at home, when you are ready for bed, when you're trying to keep the kids motivated to learn, when they want to be sleeping or outside playing in the snow all the time. So, we're just going to share some tips with you and some great books for the next few months.
Okay, so I'm going to start. I'm going to start with a tip, kind of. And so my first tip is to establish a favorite reading spot. And for this one, you probably want to let your child lead with that. Kind of make a designated reading spot. Where does your child like to read? Where do you like to read together? Designate that, get cozy with some blankets, and just let them have that special place where you read together every day or every night and establish a routine. And then as they start to develop their own reading habits, then they will go to that spot and become a reader themselves. So with that, I am going to introduce my first favorite book. And my first favorite is A Treasury of Nursery Rhymes. And it doesn't have to be this exact book. This one is just a children's treasury of nursery rhymes, and the illustrations are by Linda Black. And I think that something like this is very good to start with a young pre-reader, even a toddler or a baby. I like to give a nursery rhyme book as a baby gift or at a baby shower. And then, like with my own children who are no longer babies anymore, but that's kind of how I started introducing literacy skills. I think that nursery rhymes are good because they have that flow to them. You get to introduce fluency and talk about rhyming and rhythm in a more natural way. And then as you start to do the finger plays and children start to copy them, then they're learning those motions. It's almost like brings music into reading. And so I like this one because it has very colorful pictures and just lends itself to making it interesting for the kids. And like I said, the finger plays, I feel like it makes it very interactive for a very young reader. So that's my first one.
I love that. And one of the things that I love that you said that I think we forget about is the importance of reading to kids, no matter their age, whether they are babies like my little one, or whether they are even, if you can get your high schooler to sit down and read a good story with you, I think that's great. Or get them to read to a younger sibling. So the books that we're talking about today really range from that baby age all the way, I would say, through maybe middle school. I'm not sure if any of them would be high school, but again, high schoolers, it's so important for them to continue to read some of those, even picture books if they have younger siblings or relatives that they might want to read to.
Mhm.
So and with that, so my first tip, and Melissa mentioned this to start with. So I have my blankie here, not my blankie, I have my blanket. And so giving the kids something cozy for them to connect to. So I have my blanket, and then take the night and read with some hot chocolate, or some hot tea, or even just a nice glass of water. But having them cozy up with a blanket and a mug, whether it's, again, hot chocolate, tea, water in the mug, just giving them that feeling of we're going to settle in for a good story together. And so with that, I want to share one of my first stories, and that is Trouble with Trolls by Jan Brett. And what I love about this is Jan Brett is such a powerful author, but one of the things I really love are the illustrations in her books always tell a little bit more of a story. So when reading this with your kiddo or your family, make sure that you read the words, but then always zoom in on the border because the border always has a cool story that goes along with it. And lots of times it gives you hints as to what's going to happen next in the story. So that's my first book, is that importance of reading the text, but also taking the time to read the pictures as well, especially with this book.
I love it. Jan Brett, one of my favorites, and I'm going to kind of skip around to where I was going to go next. I have another kind of treasury. This is something I really like, as having like that treasury, because it's kind of like a compilation of different things. And I think that kids enjoy, like, I'm going to pick what's next, and having that thicker book makes them feel more like a real reader, even though we know all reading is real, whether they're being read to, or they're kind of making up the story as they go along, or they're actually starting to read those words, or they're reading independently. All of that is real reading. But kids like a thick, heavy book. They feel like it's important. And so I have this, it's called the Read Aloud Treasury. And this one is full of nursery rhymes, poems, stories, and just a big compilation of a whole lot of different things. I think it's good for toddlers and school-age children. But the reason I picked this wasn't necessarily for the whole book, but it was for the Gingerbread Man. And I just thought of this because when you said Jan Brett, she has a wonderful version of the Gingerbread Baby. And this is the Gingerbread Man in the book. And so I think just talking about Gingerbread Man, Gingerbread Baby, all those different versions, any version you can get your hands on, even just talking the oral version, just telling the story of the Gingerbread Man is just as important. And doing things like that, I think comparing authors, comparing the different versions starts to get kids, starts to develop their imagination. You can actually make a gingerbread house. You could make a gingerbread man out of paper. You can do all of those things and just start to develop their creativity all through a story. So I think whether it's Jan Brett's version of the Gingerbread Baby, or something like this that has the Gingerbread Man in it, there are so many different versions. But I think a classic story such as that is important too, to keep those classic versions going.
That's perfect. I love that, because that actually, so I switched where I was going to go after hearing you say that. And one of my favorite things to do is to read those different versions of stories. And so I pulled out one of my other favorites, Cinderella, which is a fractured fairy tale based off of Cinderella. So now's a great time, like you were saying, Melissa, to explore some of those different types of versions of stories. And the cool thing is that you can find so many different types of versions at your local library, or if you have not used your digital local library, you can do that easily with signing up with your library card and getting on either Overdrive or Sora, or I use Libby, and then you also have Hoopla available. So even if you were to just go in and type Gingerbread Man or Gingerbread Stories, you're going to get a ton of different versions. Same thing with like fractured fairy tales, Cinderella. I have another one that's my favorite, where Cinderella is it's a Western style Cinderella. So she's in her cowboy boots and riding horses. And so now's a great time to just kind of pull those and say, we're going to read some of our favorite fractured fairy tales to go along with the classics, remembering the classics. So Cinderella is one of my favorites with that as well.
I love that. And I think that helps to get the child's imagination going, because then they start to act it out, and then they want to pull out dress up clothes or act it out with puppets, and all of that helps them become a more literate person and gets their vocabulary developed. All of that will help them as they get older. So with that, my next tip is to do something like you had said, Sandy, get cozy. Another way to get cozy when you're reading is to, kind of dim the lights. Right now you might have string lights or fairy lights. all of that, and just read with just those lights on. It's not just for December. You can have those up all the time. And now they have the ones that change color. And so you can kind of use those to have it just be a little bit more cozy spot. So I would say to take advantage of something like that and just make it cute and fun to read by. So another classic that I picked that I thought was very timely for this time of year is I have this little, one of these little golden books. And this isn't the typical Rudolph story, but that kind of was what I was going for, was a typical Rudolph story. This one's more of like a spin-off, but you could compare this to regular Rudolph that you might know the story from TV or the movie, and you could even compare with the song of Rudolph. And so this one's just like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. Oh no, I think it's more of a shortened version. But then you could also compare it to a story that I love, Olive,
That one.
the other reindeer, which Olive is actually a dog. So I love this story, especially for this time of year. And it's just a cute, heartwarming story that really says, everybody's special and everybody is an individual. And so I think that that's a cute one. And you can kind of compare that one to Rudolph. It's very different, but yet has the same meaning. So I think that would be my next one is Olive the Other Reindeer, and just kind of talking about those different books.
I love Olive. I actually was just reading it last night to my little one, and it made me think of something that's really important. And that is, I was starting to get to a little bit frustrated because she wasn't listening to the story and I wasn't able to get through the pages. She's 16 months old. So of course I can't read all of that to her, but just to remember that telling her the story and telling them the story, even if you can't always get through the whole book, is enough. It's, you can still tell the story. They can still hear that as reading. And so that's not the tip I was going to go with, but I think that's the tip I'll share this time is like, it's okay to just read the pictures to your kiddos if they're not at a point where they're okay to just sit down and listen to the full story. And if you don't finish the book, that was my other thing. I needed her to finish the book because I want her to finish. It's okay if she doesn't finish the book. Come back to it the next night and maybe just read the first few pages again, and that's okay. So that's my tip.
Great tip. Great tip.
I was like, I need to finish the story. But so along those lines, one of the important things that I enjoy about this time of year is learning about different holidays and learning about what other people celebrate. So I pulled out 3 of my favorites that kind of help me learn about different cultures and different holidays. One of my favorites is 8 Wild Nights, as we are here in the start of Hanukkah. And so this kind of talks about the family traditions that this family has with the 8 nights of Hanukkah and how they celebrate each night. And it also teaches you about the menorah and the importance of the togetherness that comes with Hanukkah. Another one of my favorites is the 7 candles for Kwanzaa. So again, kind of helping you understand the history behind it, why we celebrate Kwanzaa and what families do during that time. And then another story that I like is, this is called Numba, One Day of Christmas. So this is actually about Hawaiian Christmas and some history behind what and how they celebrate Christmas in Hawaii. So I just think now is a great time to explore other cultures, and literature is a great way to do it. There's so many wonderful picture books out there. Again, I actually was looking and I found right away 7 Candles for Kwanzaa on Hoopla. So you're able to read the story. It can be read to you. You can look at the ebook. So just really taking this time to share some of the different traditions that people celebrate, even within your own family, and then through other cultures and other holidays this time of year.
Those are great. I've not seen that last one, which I think brings me to my next thought, is that the books that we choose, we can help expose our children to things that maybe we weren't exposed to or that they wouldn't be exposed to, because it just brings different parts of the world right into our homes, into our laps, into every thing, and we can talk about different vocabulary and different parts of life. I think it's wonderful that we can do that. So those are good choices. That leads kind of right into my next tip is, as we are celebrating with family, not all of us have our family right near us. So we can establish some reading habits where when we are FaceTiming with family, that's a great thing to do, is read with your children, whether you are the reader reading to children that are far away, or they're reading to you or to a relative. So if you have young children and they have relatives that are far away, then maybe you could start to establish that, like they could read to maybe their grandparents that are far away, or the grandparents could read them a bedtime story. I think that that would be wonderful, and it would help connect everybody that isn't necessarily close. So that's my next tip. My next story that I'm going to talk about is one that is another classic. I just have some classics, I guess, today. Corduroy. I love Corduroy. I think it's a great one to start to introduce retelling, because I think it helps kids understand like what happened at the beginning of the story, what are the steps that happened. Poor Corduroy loses his button, and just about every child loses something. And so they can identify with the character and understand how he felt and what he needed to do. And so it's kind of that problem and solution. And so I think that that helps generate conversation about a story. So that is my next one, is something classic like Corduroy.
I love it. So that's awesome. And it kind of leads me into my next tip that I was going to do. So I'll get ready for it. So, you're traveling a lot, whether you're traveling over the holidays, maybe to go see family members, or if you're jumping on that Zoom, you could do kind of a fun, like, theme night. And so you're going to cozy up and put on your mittens for your read aloud, and you're reading over somebody with Zoom, or in the car, put on your fun mittens and put on your hat. And then you can read a story like you are outside in an igloo or something. So
Oh,
I'm
cool.
all set for, I'm going, if we get some big snow, I'm going to go pretend like I'm reading out in the snow. So again, yes, it might seem silly, but anything to keep your kiddos engaged and excited to read a good book is always fun. And kids love trying to like turn pages in mittens, and they love being able to like pretend like they're cold. And so I'm going to share two books for my next, actually I might share a couple. So I shared some other holiday books. I wanted to share some of my favorite Christmas books. One of them is Grace at Christmas. And this talks about, I'm going to put my mittens on, and this talks about Grace's family traditions that she has at Christmas time, and how it's all, for her, it's a lot about family and how family gets together. And so she shares about that. So Grace is one of my favorite ones. This is when you talk about snow and you go out and maybe build your first snowman, you could read Snowman at Christmas. It talks about the story of a little boy who builds a snowman, and then the snowman meets the snow lady, and it's what they do over Christmas, and what happens when you wake up in the morning and notice, maybe your snowman facing a different way or looking a different way. So this would be a fun one to dress up in your winter gear and read, and have your hot chocolate, right? And then this is my absolute favorite, more so because I love the illustrator. So this is called Santa Kid, and I have several books by Michael, or that are illustrated by Michael Garland. But this book is just, if I get my ends right, the story is awesome, but the illustrations are just gorgeous. So one of the things to really talk about when you are reading a story is how the colors play into helping to tell the story. How do the illustrations help you understand what's happening? How can the faces of the characters, and you can almost already tell by looking at this page what's happening without me even reading any of the story. So this is one of my favorites, and it ends with this beautiful, if I can get to it with my mittens, with this beautiful, it's this gorgeous poster that I don't obviously wouldn't rip out, but just the colors are so vibrant, and it really helps to tell the story, and it helps kiddos to understand the setting of what's happening. So those are three of my favorites for Christmas time, and the tip of cozy up with your hat, mittens, and gloves.
That was a good one. I've not seen that book. That is an amazing
I love
book.
it.
And I love what you said, because even if we're talking about very young readers and we start talking about the, like, look at the pictures and what do you notice? And then you said the word setting, which obviously if we were talking with a young reader, we wouldn't say like, what is the setting? But we would say, where is this story happening? Or we'd say this story is at the, North Pole or wherever it is. And that's what starts to help those concepts be cemented in a child's brain, that where they really understand it before it's taught in a formal setting. So that's what we want. We want them to learn things naturally through conversations. So I love what you said. That was great. Good choice. Good choice.
Thanks.
So my next one, I think I'm going to go a little bit different, and I'm going to go these choices. I have 3 books here, and I picked these because I think that for a little bit older of a reader, once kids start to feel a little bit more comfortable, they get past those early readers, and then it's like they go over a hump where they're just starting to read, they're just starting to feel comfortable, and they want to feel like a big kid. And so they want to know, like, what can I read? And they find a book that they can read, and then they want more of the same. And so this is like the Henry and Mudge series, but there are several series like this. And I like Henry and Mudge because I think they're good for kids. I think there are lots of situations that an actual child would get themselves into, and it makes sense. I also like it because Henry has a dog, and it just, the dog's lovable. It's understandable. The dog kind of gets in trouble, just that typical situation. And then there's a spin-off of the books where the little girl, I think maybe is the cousin. And so then there's a spin-off of books with her. And so then if that tends to be more of an interest, then you can read those. But I do like any kind of a series, I think is something good. Which brings me to my next tip of, if you have a pet, that you can have your child read to your pet, because what's a better listener than a pet? If you have a cat or a dog that will sit still, and you have a child that's learning to read, and they believe that that dog or cat is listening to them, why not have them read? It's great practice for them, and a little bit of bonding time with their pet is not a bad idea. So that is my next tip, is have your child read to their pet.
I love that. And my tip is perfect because if they don't have a pet, they can read to their stuffed animal. So they can line up their stuffed animals and read to them, or just sit your stuffed animal down and read to your little llama and tell them the story as well, especially with our kiddos that use a lot of imaginative play. Having them at the end have the stuffed animal pretend to tell them back what the story was about is a good way for them to practice retelling the story as well. So they can read to their stuffed animal, or they can just kind of cozy up with their stuffed animal as they're reading, with some of the other ways that we talked about being cozy. So let them get out those stuffed animals, or even if you have one of your stuffed animals from when you were little, have them read to one of your favorite stuffed animals if you still have those that you've passed along to a kiddo. And then with that, 2 of my favorite books for kind of the end of the year, the beginning of the year. One of my absolute favorites is The Night Before New Year's. And so it plays on the night before Christmas, but this is the night before New Year's, and it really talks about the different things that the family does the night before New Year's. And it's a really great way to talk about traditions. If you have traditions for New Year's, or if you're looking to start one, or you want to start to include your kiddos on understanding that, and just the fun ways that it leads up to the end of the year, and that midnight and what happens at midnight. And so how they stay awake for New Year's Eve is part of the story as well. So this is one of my favorites to read, that the last day of December, or the last day of the year. And then another one that I really enjoyed to start the year is What Do Little Penguins Do? And it is a book of the months. So it's a great way to start the year and really start to think about what do the penguins do during each month. And as you can see, it talks about some of the holidays in the months, also seasons. So it's a great great predictor for the kids to think about what's happening at each time of the year. And then obviously it's snowmen, so you can start to think about what happens or penguins, and you can start to think about what happens with the penguins and the snow person in the winter months, or in the summer months as well. So those are my end of the year, beginning of the new year books.
Very good. My next choice is any Curious George book there is. Because I think Curious George is one of those characters that just about everybody can, read and enjoy. Curious George is kind of timeless. It used to be just the books, and then there was the movie and the cartoon. He's just that naughty monkey that we can all learn from his mistakes. He's definitely lovable, and he is a good one that exposes children to many different adventures. He goes to the library, he goes to the zoo, he goes to school and the city, camping. He pretty much goes everywhere. And I think kids of all ages can read these books or be read these books and just understand, that what did he do now, and how is he going to get through this problem. So I think that these are just good books. They're definitely not new, but they're also not necessarily out of date. So I think that, that's good. And I think anybody that grew up with Curious George is probably going to enjoy reading it out loud. So just kind of a fun one.
Love it. So I have 3 more books. I'm going to share 2 this time, but I want to share my last tip. And thinking about kind of our older readers, lots of times, and the younger ones as well, but older ones kind of like to cuddle up with a flashlight. And if I can figure out how to turn on my flashlight, a flashlight. And then behind me, I have a tent. So, you can get your tent out, or a sheet even, and make a fort and let the kiddos go inside and read in that special place, like Melissa, you were talking about earlier. Maybe they do have a tent that they enjoy, or if you have a tent that you would be willing to let your kiddos put up outside if it's not too cold, and have a night reading outside and do some under the stars reading, even though it's wintertime, there still might be those evenings that aren't too cold. And so letting them just have that flashlight, which I don't know what it is, that kids think it is so cool to read by a flashlight, and just have that book in. And it also makes some awesome pictures as well. So if you're somebody that likes to get pictures of your kiddos reading, so doing that. And kiddos that are reading chapter books really tend to enjoy that, especially if the chapter book has some like spook to it, mystery. And so 2 of mine that I wanted to share was the Endling, The Last. And so this is part of a series, and this book is really popular, definitely a larger read. So you might even want to read it with your kiddo. And a great way to do that is you read a page, they read a page, or you read a page, they read a paragraph if they're not ready. Or, even you guys read chapters by yourselves and talk about it, maybe over dinner in the car. But this book is a great book. It really has a lot of that like fictional feel to it. You've got this creative character here. Obviously they're walking, kind of fierce fighting types of animals, but they're fictional type feel. And then the other one is Snow Lane. And so this story, when you think about reading a book, we have books that we've read a long time ago that we need to circle back to. This is one of those that I was like, oh yeah, I remember this story, but this would be a great one for me to pick up and read again with my kiddo because it's been a little while. So this story really talks about a little girl who is just trying to make her mark. And so this is another story that I would pick out to share.
Very nice. So you talked about using your flashlight and reading and kind of reading in the dark. And with that, we have some kiddos that might be a little bit scared of the dark. And so the book I picked is called I'm Not Scared.
Oh.
And it's the cutest little owl. We know that owls are nocturnal, and this one's by Jonathan Allen. And the owl actually has a little stuffed owl. But Baby Owl is not scared of the dark. And so I think Baby Owl is trying to convince herself that she's not scared of the dark. And so it just goes through like, she's taking a walk in the woods and not scared. And then, meets different characters and is having conversations with the different characters and talking about how she's not scared. And then in the end, of course, decides who is scared, and it's okay to be safe, and we're all safe at home in our beds. And I think that it just brings that idea back that it's okay to be afraid and it's okay to have those feelings, but that we're safe at home. And I think something like that is a good one to read with your child so that they can maybe start to talk about their feelings, or just kind of understand that not everybody maybe feels as confident as they do, and we all have our own feelings. So I think a book like that one is a good one to read.
Love it. Well, I have my last book, if that's okay to share my last
Yeah,
one.
that was my last.
Perfect. Okay. Well, and so I'll share my last tip on my last book, and then we can wrap it up. And my last tip is to just have fun. Have fun reading with your kiddo. Get creative. They enjoy anything that is different and new. So whether it's maybe if you have a fireplace, reading by the fireplace, reading to, if you get to build a snowman or snow woman, read to that snow person outside from inside and tell that story to that snow person. Let them get creative and just enjoy time being with you. That's what my biggest tip is. This is another time for them to be with you. Whether you are a grandma, a grandpa, an aunt, an uncle, a mom, a dad, a caregiver, or a big brother, a big sister, just being with them and letting them hear you read and enjoying the story with them is building that lifelong reader that we don't ever want to let them loose. So just have fun with that. And so with this last one, and this is a really fun story. This is called Snowbound, and this little boy gets creative and just imagines all these things that he can do as a captain and of this sled. And so you can see his sorry, I'm on the wrong. His sled is a folding chair. So he just gets it's this diary entries or his log of his different made up adventures that he has. So letting them create something like that as well. And so that wraps up my last story. And like I said, this is just a time to have fun with them. These were just some suggestions. There's no book that's not okay to read with your kids. Read any type of story, read a magazine, read a menu, just really taking that time to read and talk with your kids about what you're reading is perfect this time of year. Melissa, anything else you want to share?
No, I agree with what you said. I think anything you can do is the right thing, and reread books. Like, just because you read one, it's not done. Come back and reread the same. I would recommend having like baskets of books in different places. So have, those baskets of books, you might switch them out, but you might have some favorites that always stay at hand. Have books in the car, have books everywhere. That's just how readers become lifelong readers, like you said. But yeah, that's what like you said, there's no wrong way to read to your child.
Love it. Well, we would like to just finish by making sure that you are, as a guardian or as a parent, that you're following Keep Indiana Learning. It is not just for Indiana educators. All of us are educators. So it is for you to pick up some tips on how to keep your kiddos growing, not just reading, but with math and STEM and all the different things that they can do to grow as a learner. So make sure that you're following Keep Indiana Learning. We would love if you read any of these stories or any other books that you have, for you to take a picture if you're comfortable with it and post it on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Keep Indiana Learning is all on those social media sites, and make sure you tag hashtag Keep Indiana Learning. I think that's the right hashtag. And we would be so excited to see you helping to build your readers. So with that, I think, thank you so much. And we'll be back later on next year to share even more stories on a different topic. So we look forward to seeing you again next time.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.